Hello guys, welcome to a new video. Today I will be talking about targeting the back muscles and getting effective growth. So mainly I will be speaking about what exercises hit what parts of the back, what you can expect from doing certain exercises, which exercises I like and I think are most effective for certain parts of the back, and how you can get a big back in general. So let's get started. So you have the trapezius, you have the rhomboids, Erectors spinae or the lower back, latissimus dorsi, Teres Major, Teres Minor, and of course the posterior deltoid. And these muscles make up the main visible part of your back musculature. So these are what we're going to be focusing on for your goals and hypertrophy growth. So explain these muscles a bit. For traps, you have the upper traps, this portion, with the middle traps which are slightly lower, and lower traps which are even lower. And for the most part, these exercises are hit with similar exercises, just some parts of the trapezius can be a little bit more isolated or targeted more by certain exercises. And I just want to explain how you can put this focus on those parts of the back even more with certain training practices and help you understand how you can target this back musculature a little bit better. So you have the lats, very wide to give you most of your width. You have the lower portion of the lat, the iliac region, and you have the upper portion of the lat, which give you that beautiful sweep in the back double bicep together with your teres major. Next up, you have the erector spinae, which is basically your lower back that helps stabilize you, gives you that sick Christmas tree, and it's the pretty much most lowest portion of your back musculature, and is often not focused on that much. So we're going to be talking about that a lot too. It helps injury prevention, helps you stay healthy, helps you stay strong. Next up, you have the rear delts. They give you that bulbous rock look at the back of your shoulder, which technically is not a part of the back, but if you want a good back double bicep, if you want a good lat spread, you're going to want to have that rear delt develop, and it's part of the back poses as a bodybuilder and lifter. Then you have the rhomboids, which are not as visible as they mostly lie below the trapezius, but I'm pretty sure if you're fairly lean, you can actually see them just close up to the delts. Then lastly, a very underrated and underknown part of the back is the teres major and minor muscles, and mainly the teres major contributes to this upper part of the back double bicep, and is often neglected because some people think, I originally thought it was just the lats, but apparently you need to get that vertical pulling in to get that teres major, teres minor developed, and it will greatly contribute to your aesthetics. But people do not realize this is the teres major and how it's targeted. So I will be talking a lot about that today. So let's get into it. First off, the traps. I personally think the traps are mainly built with stretching movements. Rows can also be great, but I think if you really want big traps, the bulk of your work is going to be stuff like farmer's carry, stuff like rack pulls, stuff that really puts a lot of stress on that trapezius region and really let you hang down that weight. Especially for the upper traps, I really suggest doing things like cheat shrugs, cheat power shrugs, and really letting your traps come forward, let your upper back round a bit to get that stretch. If you really want to hit that middle part of the trapezius, rack pulls are great, and if you do like more of that stringing motion, that will also be more targeted. But I think if you really want to isolate the upper trap and really feel the stretch, I think letting your back around forward is really good. And of course, you're mainly going to want to stretch those traps if you want the most growth, because weighted stretches for traps, as we know, and as Alpha Destiny has taught us mostly. Yep. So you have different fibers of the upper traps, middle traps, and lower traps. The middle traps are a little bit more targeted by stuff like rows, stuff and like leaning slightly more over and doing things like farmer's folks. Farmer's folks are therefore a great developer because they not only stretch your back forward and stretch the back in general, but they also need to help you stabilize the weights at the sides which will make it even more difficult. That's why they are the best movement. But power shrugs are great, rack pulls are great because you can really overload them, and especially when you go really wide, like a snatch grip, I think those will be very effective for your trap growth. Yeah. But you don't always need to do extra trap work, of course. Some people do not like the look of big traps for aesthetics, and if you're narrow, I think it actually can make you look a little bit more narrow. But that's highly self. You need to make the decision for yourself. And some people may not need direct tap installation, but for that thick upper back look, I think doing a lot of back pulls, a lot of shrugs, it's gonna be great. A lot of farm shot, and they're just chatty movements in my opinion. They look sick. For the middle traps, as I said, the farmer's walks, the rows, gonna be more effective. Just not being as high or letting the top stretch as much, but focusing more on the shrinking back motion and having the weight lower. And then for the lower traps, I think you can. With the lower traps, I think you can really focus on getting that squeeze in the deep back, doing stuff like behind the back deadlifts, behind the back shrugs, to really feel the lower portion, which might be hard because the upper portion is mainly going to be dominant in things like rack pulls. Also, I think the lower traps are decently activated or fairly well activated and isolated in things like Y raises and overhead movements to stabilize. So I would try out Y raises and do more stuff like Lou raises in your program if you want to build the lower trap a bit. Of course, they will not be the limiting factor, but I think it would help you get some extra work in, and it would be a nice way to try out different variations of other exercises while getting more working for the lower traps and really get that arrow shape in the bottom. Okay, so next the lats. For the lats, I mainly think close grip and wide grip, vertical pulling or diagonal pulling work is gonna be your best bet. I personally think the close grip is the best for lats, but people often think it's the wide grip. That's the whole thing. People mistake the Teres Major for the width of the upper lat, and I think wide grip pull-ups are a great developer and really take the arms out of the motion more, allowing you to use more lats and use more Teres Major. And I think they are probably the best developer for width. But if you really would only want to target the lats, I would go with a way closer grip and really arch that back forward. And that way you can really isolate and feel the lats. So I would just not retract, protract the scapula, and then just really scoop those lats in with the diagonal motion. Do stuff like pullovers, do stuff like neutral grip pull downs, close grip neutral grip pull ups, close grip pull downs, and really get that arch in with that pronated back position. And I personally feel that the best in my back. Also for lats, I really like stretching movements. That's great. You can do dumbbell pullovers, dumbbell rows are fine too if you do them close to the body. But cables are great. Cable pull-ups are great, but pull-ups are probably the all-time best. I just find it hard to often get high amounts of volume in sometimes. But you can of course also use assisted machines on those movements. So for that, wide grip to the sides, just like also start the Teres Major, but also hits the lats as the Teres Major and the lats have very similar functions. But if you only want to directly try to stimulate the lats, go for a closer grip, but try to keep your arms out of the movement. So yeah, arms from the body, pronated, and get an arch is the most important part for lat development. And you can do similar things with that wider grip, like this, but keep that arch. Next up is the lower back. I personally think lower back development is usually best done by doing a lot of deadlifts. I personally don't deadlift that often, so if I want to build my lower back up, I should focus more on RDLs, stuff like good morning, stuff like back extension, stuff like back extension of the machine, stuff like back extension with like a dumbbell or a weight, or GHR. Are also great when you're lying on the bench with your chest and you put your legs up. That's a GHR extension. Those are all great and will hit your lower back, and you mainly want to try not to overload it too much. So that's why I don't suggest deadlifting that much in a training week. Maybe once and twice is probably already pushing it, but try to get that lower back volume in or lower back conditioning in by doing other stuff like GHR extensions, back extensions, and maybe stuff like Jefferson curls can also be great. But don't use too much weight. Don't don't try to do like a 1 rep max deadlift to train your back or something stupid like that. If you're gonna let your back around to train it, you want to be using lightweight and really get into the motion of injury prevention. The lower back is also trained with stuff like barbell rows and because you stabilize the body. Therefore, if you really want to get the most out of your barbell rows, you probably don't want to do them on the deadlift day because your lower back might be tired and you might not be able to really finish off that upper back. But you also get indirect stimulus for barbell rows, as I said. Then from stuff like machine rows, because you're usually doing active pronation and retraction, protraction and retraction, you will also be hitting the lower back a bit, even though it's just supported row. And that will also add a little bit of volume to your lower back. So for lower back, you really want to stimulate it, but the heavy stimulus should not be done too often, and the light stimulus should be done, I think, as often as you can recover from it, while not interfering with your heavy stimulus session. Of course, you also want to be aware of axial fatigue. That's the fatigue that can be put on the spine. It is said that deadlifters often the top deadlifters have so much pressure on their central nervous system fatigue and their axial fatigue that they can only do like a 1 rep max deadlift every 10 days. So you should be aware to not overtrain it that much because axial fatigue is a real thing. I'm not that knowledgeable about it, but I just know that you should be extra careful with that lower back training. It's really a tool for natural and enhanced lifters to play around in your training, to not do too much lower back volume, but also don't do too little. If you're not doing anything that taxes the lower back, you're gonna want to change the program and do some back extensions and do maybe add in some RDLs or add in more barbell rows just so you get actual stimulus and not have a weak lower back because you keep doing only machine rows. So next up are the rear delts. I believe the rear delts are very well trained with wide grip pulling work, but so like machine rows, right, barbell rows, and really high up on the back. Those are great, especially if you start with it. It's gonna light up your rear delts quite a bit. I also feel I get quite a little bit of rear delts from things like rack pulls if I flex at the top. That's quite decent, but I personally think that as long as you do your rowing for upper back, the rear delts will be hit quite well. Although always isolation is preferred for pretty much any muscle. So if you really want to be perfect or isolate the rear delts, I would advise the 45-degree angle. You want to move slightly downward in that 45-degree angle. That will usually stimulate the rear delts the best. So downward face pulls, reverse back deck with slightly downwards angle, or a machine row that you can do high to low. Dumbbell flies, all great exercises. I don't think we have to complicate it that much. Although this is probably the optimal angle: slightly downwards, slightly diagonal, 45-degree angle. Personally, I too like to utilize the stretch movements like this. And so if I do like a personal favorite for me to train the rear delt is going on a back supported machine row, really letting myself protect the scapula and then only moving the rear delt. As my upper back is actually not working that much in this position, I can really just focus the rear delt, and that seems to work a lot for me. So I would try out the protection focused high rows on the machine. Those are great. Because the upper back isn't moving as much. So yeah. But in general, you can isolate with reverse back decks and stuff like that, as I said. But if you do a lot of enough upper back work or high volume on the upper back work, your rear delts are probably going to be pretty well stimulated in general from that upper back work. So like trap work will also stimulate your rear delts. So you're probably going to be even fine without isolating if you do enough work with your back, but always isolate if you want the most results. Also, we have the rhomboids. The rhomboids are actually not that visible. They only seem to be visible when extremely lean, and they will be visible close to the scapula. The rhomboids are usually below the traps, and I think the rhomboids are mostly just used in general back movements. You don't really have to isolate them. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So stuff like rows, stuff like upper back pull-ups, pretty much every back movement will train the rhomboids. I just want to include them as they are sometimes talked about. Just do your back work, honestly. This one is not very complicated. Then you have the Infraspinatus. These actually have a fairly similar movement pattern as the rear delts. You can see in this picture to the above me that there is infraspinatus right there. I'm actually not that familiar with this muscle, but it seems that it's mostly used to get that external rotation. So people often injure themselves, and I think this can be an important part to talk about, as this is the external rotator muscle and probably has a lot of value for shoulder health. So doing those externally rotated face pulls, doing a lot of work similar to the rear delts, and especially those high face pulls will help you build that infraspinatus, and it will greatly encourage your shoulder health, injury prevention, and probably will get you injured less quickly. So yeah. Lastly, I want to be talking about the Teres Major, Teres Minor. So mainly the Teres Major is the biggest one. Teres Minor is not that visible, to be honest. But the Teres Major is this upper part of the leg. You can't really see it, but it's mostly when you just post that upper lat, but you can mostly see it from the back, as in this picture above me. The Teres Major is actually mainly trained with the vertical pulling. Before I thought vertical pulling, you just go lats. There's really no point in doing certain like upper back focused vertical pulling. But then I realized after some time that it was kind of underdeveloped for me here, and I wasn't really getting that outer effect of the lats. So I did some research, and it seemed to me that I was kind of missing the Teres Major, or at least not focusing on it. So for the So lastly, we have the Teres Major. So if you want the Teres Major, which is basically the upper part of the lat, it's not just above the lat, right here in some poses, and it's visible from the back as seen in this picture above me. It's actually trained by mainly vertical pulling and vertical pulling with the arms to the side. So if you go just in front, just slightly in front of you, I feel them most, but even if you go behind your body, they will be stretched and activated in the top part of the range of motion mostly. So I think this muscle is really not talked about enough, and actually contributes a lot to the upper wave, or to the wave of the back, and it's quite visible, as you can see. So you don't want to neglect your upper back pulling work, because you will get your pretty much all your Teres Major stimulus from this from that vertical pulling work. And I made the mistake of thinking, oh wait, I can pretty much focus all my vertical pulling work for lats, because I wanted to focus on lats. I was like, okay, so this is useless. I won't do that. Close grip is best for lats, so I just do that. But I was wrong. You want the Teres Major. It greatly benefits your aesthetics. You want to do that wide grip vertical pulling, mainly to the sides, and that's going to really help out your Teres Major and still your lats. So it's pretty much a win-win. But don't forget, also don't neglect it. Don't neglect it, because I did, and I regret it. And you want that wide back. It's very important for your aesthetics. So get that vertical pulling in. So yeah, guys, this is the presentation. I hope you got a better idea of how the back works, what muscles work best for certain areas, and how you can fully develop that beautiful free taper and thickness. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.